All right, and we are live. I've got a very special live stream today. I wanted to do this kind of in between the episodes that we have coming up. If you've been following the So Weird series that we've been doing all year, the next one is coming within the next couple of weeks, but we have a very exciting one coming up as well, where I essentially link up with Travis Walton, one of the most famous abductees, and I actually go back to the actual abduction site and hear exactly from him, in his words, what happened and what went down. And so that video is also coming out soon. But I wanted to introduce you to someone who I met along the way who really helped make that video happen. Her name is Jenn Stein. Now, Jenn is known for a couple of things in the UFO community. She's been very active in the UFO sphere for decades at this point, but right now she is the head of MUFON in the Sedona branch in Arizona. Now, Sedona already has its own lore and legends and things that make it so interesting in itself, but to be the head of MUFON in Sedona is kind of like being the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. It's like, to me, in my opinion, because how active Arizona is, Sedona is such a special place for not only people who are interested in paranormal and UFOs, but many other things. So we're going to bring her on here in a second, but I also want to say that she also produced the film Travis, one of the more recent and biggest deep dives on the Travis Walton abduction case. It's one of my favorite UFO films, even before I started making these YouTube documentaries of my own. And so it was really cool for me to be able to not only connect with her, but have her essentially help us make this video that's coming out soon happen. But I wanted to bring her on real quick because she has a few interesting things going on in the world of MUFON and UFOs, specifically an upcoming conference. If you want to check that out, she will be able to tell you more about that. But more importantly, being in the position that she's in, she's probably got a lot of interesting stories to tell. And also, this is your opportunity to ask us, or especially her, any questions that you might have about UFOs. So without any further ado, let's bring Jenn on. How are you doing, Jenn?
Great to see you, Patrick. Thank you for putting this together.
Thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you for that lovely introduction. Kudos to you. It's always nice to work and meet with other filmmakers, and you do a fantastic job. I love what you did with the Phoenix Lights and with some of your other productions, especially the JFK series. They caught my attention. So I have a lot of respect for what you do.
Yeah, I just realized that there's a connection between the JFK video that I did and another film that I think you had a little bit of part of with James Forrestal, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. The extraordinary life and the suspicious death of James Forrestal that I did with another film producer, Bob Terrio, who's going to come in and be at our conference. And of course, the writer and really the creator of that data, that background research, which was 10 years worth of research, is Peter Robbins, well-known writer and respected ufologist in the field. So it was a great honor to work on that piece. And that was a real spontaneous, creative thing. There was a PowerPoint that we said, this needs to be like in a short film. So we tried to put that together one weekend with a teleprompter. And it was like one of those, what you call quick, instant 24-hour films.
Yeah.
But, it came out well. So yes, and that's not out yet. We're hoping to get that out through Film Hub.
Wow.
I have to needle Peter Robbins to get that up.
Well, I know you gave me a physical copy like close to a year ago when we first connected and started planning out this Travis Walton video. But real quick, while people are hopping on to the live stream, give us like a real quick, in a nutshell, what's going on with this upcoming conference, and then we can start taking some questions and whatnot.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, it's quite exciting. About a year ago, actually, after watching the Global World Disclosure Day that the New Paradigm Institute put on, I realized the importance of grassroots working together to acknowledge the UFO phenomenon. And since October 20th was going to be, from now on, it's a national holiday, it's UFO Awareness Day, I thought, wow, let's plan a conference that incorporates that into next year's event, and let's honor Travis Walton. So that's when this whole thing kind of started, because it would be the 50th anniversary of his event. So those people who are watching, you know, that's November 5th, 1975. It's now 2025. It's been 50 years. So we've put together a 4-day conference. It's really quite amazing. We start out with a film, Accidental Truth, that I also co-produced with Ron James. And then all day Saturday, starting at like 9 in the morning till 6 at night, we go all day with incredible speakers. We have Don Schmidt coming in. We have David Hatcher Childress. I'll also be there presenting with Travis Walton, a 50-year retrospective. And then Sunday, our venue is a church. So Sunday, we have a half a day so people can rest from the Saturday. They can go out and party Saturday night and sleep in Sunday. Sunday starts at noon, and we go to noon till actually about 10 at night if people want to partake in what we're doing in the evening. But we have all day speakers as well and a panel. And then we have a nice dinner at Tlaquepaque up in Sedona with our speakers and our volunteers and anyone who wants to join, but that's limited seating. And then Sunday or Monday morning, we close out the conference participating with the International Global Disclosure Day with Danny Sheehan and the New Paradigm Institute. So that's a real honor. And everyone is there because we're paying tribute to the 50 years of Travis's experience.
That's
So
awesome.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. Well, I know that Travis won. What were you going to say?
Maybe
what were you
you'll
saying?
come. We've been talking about you coming. Maybe you'll come.
I'm definitely going to make an effort to get up there at some point in the weekend. That's for sure. And I know that you've been working hard on this for a while. So real quick, how did you first get connected to Travis? Because you and Travis go way back, right?
We do. I'm just making a note to make sure you have a press pass for Patrick James. The way I met Travis is I was asked by my good friend Peter Robbins, whom I've known for 25 years now or so at least, to be his assistant for one of the Roswell UFO conferences, because those are, you know, mega conferences. 10,000 people show up. It's a zoo, and there's a lot of little pieces that have to get taken care of. And he just really needed a good assistant. And since I was a former event coordinator and planner and party planner, wedding planner kind of thing, I said, no problem. I'll come in, I'll fly in and rent a car, and, you know, I'll be your gal Friday. So Travis was there, and we all had dinner after the conference, and we had a bottle of wine, and we started to talk, and we said, Travis, you know, your story is 25 years newer than the Roswell story, almost practically, right? And it's just as significant, just as important. In fact, you guys are not military, so you can talk about your experience. So it's a unique story, and there should be a conference every year, maybe in Sedona or Heber or Snowflake where you are. It could be a real economic boom to your area. And if we can help you do that, we will, right? So at that point, it was 2010. So Peter and I kind of naively committed to doing a conference, which we pulled off. In 2014, we did the first 39th annual anniversary conference leading up to the 40th. And then finally, we passed it off to Karen Bard and Alejandro Rojas, who did a great job with the 40th anniversary. And I started working on archiving film for the conference, but then it ended up turning into a documentary film. So that's kind of how it all unfolded. You know, I'm an Aries, and I tend to jump in to situations that are sometimes a pickle. And then I have to figure out my way out of them, right? And I didn't realize I was making a documentary film when I started planning the conference. But as it turned out, I'm glad I did, because many of the people in this film are now gone. You know, we've lost another logger. We lost John Goulet about a year ago. And we've also lost all the two main police officers, Sheriff Marlon Gillespie and Deputy Chuck Ellison. And we also lost the chief polygraph examiner, Cy Gilson. So, you know, we have them archived for historical purposes. I think that's really important, especially for the younger generations, you know?
Yeah. So I'm curious.
For your generation.
Yeah. I'm curious, what was it about Travis's case for you that made you like, because once you got connected with him, this has been a story that you've not only really helped. I mean, you and Travis are like really close now. You're almost his pseudo manager at this point. I mean, what was it about his case that really stood out to you and made you just become, you know, kind of obsessed with it?
Well, first of all, Hollywood did a film about Travis, right? And Universal or Paramount Pictures did this Fire in the Sky, but it changed the nature of the story. They didn't stick to the trueness of the story, and they changed a lot of facts and details, especially his onboard the craft experiences and his actually one-on-one encounter with two different species of non-human intelligence who were probably trying to save his life. And the more I learned, the more I read his book, and the more time I spent with him, his integrity just, really downloaded into me. And I saw the amount of ridicule and debunking that he went through. I'm a bit of an archivist, and I really had the pleasure of being mentored by Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Marden. And they took me into the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, and we read the Phil Class files. And I saw how Travis, and really Mike Rogers was the one who really dealt with Philip Class. I saw how this ruined their lives. And I thought to myself, my God, this needs to be a documentary film for people to really understand the human aspect of this encounter that these men had. And nobody had done it. And I kind of, sat there one day and said, I've got it half done. I've interviewed all the bloggers, which I had done for the conference in case they couldn't make it, and I took them up to the forest in case it was going to snow and we couldn't get up there, because it's this, the Mogollon Rim is a 7,000 foot rim, and by November there's snow on the ground often up there. So if we're doing a conference in November for the 40th anniversary, we couldn't necessarily go to the forest if it was snowing. So, it just kind of eventually, I had this cognition like one night. You get these inspirations, these light bulbs go off in your head. And I thought, my God, this really needs to be a film. And someone needs to try to, give respect to what these men have been through. And I was hoping that the film would sort of do that, it would bring like restitution to them in some way. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what happened. That's how it all came about.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight this comment real quick. I agree. I think for me, that's one of the things that always stood out about the story was not only the fact that he's been very consistent. People when they talk about consistent accounts, you hear about Travis Walton, Bob Lazar. I mean, it's a handful of names because these stories happened many, many years ago, right? But one of the things that I guess, interested me personally about Travis's account was a handful of things. One, the fact that it was news ahead of him even returning from the craft, like it was almost like a true crime investigation before it was a paranormal investigation. And then once he returns, it's like just, a twist. I mean, I can see why they made a Hollywood movie out of it, because you almost couldn't write it that way. And when he comes back, it's an oddly consistent story. But then three, just the entities that he ended up meeting on the craft, the fact that there were human looking entities that were wearing these spacesuits. I mean, you got to think back to all the different stories of, let's say, Eisenhower meeting extraterrestrials and all the stories of like Billy Meyer meeting Nordics. It just what the beings looked like is oddly consistent with any claims of Nordics and Greys that you hear from everyone else,
Also, the early stories of George Adamski, right? Same sort of thing. And George Van Tassel, same sort of thing, out of Giant Rock. So, and then there are, of course, other stories from around the world that describe the same thing. And yes, these are early encounters. Many of these encounters start there's some in the 40s, some in the 50s, more in the 50s, more in the 60s, more in the 70s. And then the 70s, sort of the whole abduction thing kind of takes a more darker turn. But in the early days, there were beings that people thought were angels that were coming to save the earth. And they really were bringing messages of hope. And there's actually a story from England where a woman hanging her laundry with her children there in the backyard in 1954 sees the same identical beings and dressed in the same outfits with the same helmets in a craft that looks just like the craft Travis saw. And they're like sitting above her house, and they tilt the craft and like wave to her and her kids. I mean, like, yeah. And then they actually telepathically sent them messages about the earth. So yes, And the thing that I like about the early stories is that this is before CGI. This is before all the debunking that's so heavy you can't understand what's real and what's not real anymore, right? It's very hard to know what's real in the world right now. You watch mainstream news and then you watch alternative media like you, and my God, you get like black and white, and you're like, well, which is it? Is it left? Is it right? I don't even know politically what's right and left anymore. It's so confusing, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a very important story. You're absolutely right. And the historical ones for the younger generations, those are the ones they should look at and study, right? The classic cases, right? Charlie Parker and the Allagash story and the Travis Walton story and the Betty and Barney Hill story. You know those backgrounds, they'll have a much better understanding of what's, happening now.
Yeah.
And also why we have so much debunking. Like the sub theme of our conference is called Secrecy to Transparency. And we pick up on what's going on in the congressional hearings. And, why has it been a secret for 80 years? Why couldn't we talk about it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get too into the weeds because I feel like there's a lot that's going to end up coming out in our upcoming videos, but
yes.
There's certainly been efforts to discredit a lot of the claims. Even going to the length of people tampering with said site. So
yes, like what we discovered together.
Yeah. And so it's only fitting that will be revealed, I guess, on the 50th anniversary, which is coming up. So if you are interested in partaking in the 50th anniversary, events coming up, definitely check out the link in the description. But real quick, I wanted to ask you, because even in our conversations outside of just talking about Travis Walton, obviously you're the head of MUFON. Explain, like, how long have you been with MUFON, and then how did that all come about for you?
Well, I got involved in MUFON in 2020. I'm sorry, not 2020, in the year 2000, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. God, time flies. Mostly because I had a sighting myself in September of 1975. It was one of those out the bedroom window things, but it was weird. It was 5:30 in the morning, and I encountered a rectangle of white light that moved very quickly, seemed to jump in and out of perspective. It was 1.5 miles away, 45 degrees on the horizon, 1,500 feet in the air. And when I finally said, "What the heck is that?" after staring at it for a while, suddenly it jumped, in and out like a stone jumping across a pond or something. And it was right outside my bedroom window. And I was confused, and it wasn't lighting anything up, but it wasn't light out yet. And it was undulating light, and it was a rectangle. But who ever heard of a flying white rectangle or brilliant white light that doesn't light anything up? I mean, it just disturbed my consciousness, and I couldn't figure out what it was. But 25 years later, around 1999 or so, 98, 99, I found out that someone else who was in my house at the time, who had spent a year in a road show with me, and we were quite good friends, well, he was asleep on another floor of the house, and he saw the same thing I did. But we never talked about it, right? How does that happen? I don't know. So 25 years later, we're smoking cigarettes and drinking wine and cooking dinner at his apartment in Hawaii. And he says, "I got to ask you a question. Like, what happened?" Right? When we saw that thing. And I was like, wait a minute. I remember the me part of this story, but not that we both saw something. And we never have talked about that. So go write down your story. Don't even tell me. You're freaking me out, right? Because it had been in my gray box, right? I had written it down in my journals and things, but I didn't know how to interpret it because I didn't know, what was it real? Was it a dream? Was it, sleep paralysis? What was going on? It was so strange. And he wrote down the same story I did. And when I knew that, I was like, wow, okay, so that part of my life experience is real. How do I take that and go forward? What does that mean? Do I keep it in the gray box the rest of my life and be confused about it? Or do I give myself permission to start to explore, start to read books, start to go to conferences? So one thing led to another. I was on a trip in 2000 and studying the crop circles with a state director from Northern California named Nubit Udiarte. And he basically tapped me on the shoulder and said, Jen, you got to start a MUFON group in Philly because there isn't one and you want to learn. So just start inviting speakers to present. And, before you know it, you'll be an expert. And I was like, I don't think so. I didn't want to start a group. I just wanted to join one. But lo and behold, as things worked out, I ended up starting a MUFON group and I never stopped. I've been at it for 5 years now. And now I do it in 2 states, Pennsylvania by Zoom and Arizona in person.
Oh, wow. And so right now you're based out of Arizona?
Yeah, I live in the Phoenix area and I go up to Sedona to run the program. So I'm not a resident of Sedona yet. Maybe I will be one day. Who knows?
Yeah. So being involved with MUFON, I gotta ask, like, do you get a lot of reports that you come across just because you're involved, like the everyday sightings that people have? And are you able to see just like when there are waves and be able to dissect if things are legit or not?
Well, I will tell you, this is one of MUFON's roles and goals, right? We say, we investigate, right? When, the government doesn't or when others don't. We have we train field investigators. In fact, we just had a big boot camp that went on with Stacy Wright. And they camped up in, I think, the White Mountains somewhere and did training. So while I am a trained field investigator, since I'm also a documentary filmmaker, I have kind of a very unique role within MUFON. There's only a few of us who are really doing what I do. And Stacy Wright sort of respects that and understands that because she does it herself. So I focus on what's called public education and outreach, because we can do the research for the benefit of humanity, but unless we're communicating back our research to the public, people don't know what's going on. So my role and goal is education, public outreach, and I'm also, since I'm a documentary filmmaker, I don't do the up close and personal field investigation work because that stays confidential. And I would be breaching potentially levels of confidentiality if I wanted to interview someone on camera or do a podcast with them or something like you do. So I politely hold back from that while I'm a trained investigator, but MUFON does do that. And yes, there are many correlations. We'll get a report on the south side of Phoenix and then another report on the north and the west side of Phoenix that all can cross triangulate. We also have new equipment coming in that will be like UFO togs and things like that are set up in the Wickenburg area on the south side of Phoenix. So there are many people putting these in and then donating their data back to MUFON. So we have more of a rapid UFO reporting system than we've ever had before. And that's continuing to grow as civilians step up and offer to do that kind of work with MUFON. So we have all different levels of volunteers. Anyone listening who wants to become involved, nobody pays you to do this work, but if you're passionate about it and you're curious and you have some skills to bring to the table, MUFON has a place for you, and we'd love to hear from you. And just go to MUFON.org, or you can go to PhoenixMUFON.com.
So I'm curious, once you get into MUFON, obviously just the volunteers, I'm assuming, wouldn't have a certain level of access. But when you start becoming part of the organization like yourself, MUFON's been around for decades, and I'm assuming they've been doing investigations for decades. If you wanted to dig up some investigation that was going on 20 years ago, do you have that ability to kind of look up what was investigated and what they found?
Yes, we do. We do. But we're not the only source for some of that data. There's a wonderful new archive that's being organized by David Mahler in Albuquerque. And people can also go there if they're not, say, a field investigator. Our files are not open to the public. They're only accessible to field investigators through what we call our CMS system. And, people can, field investigators can request more detailed data if we have it in our files. Sometimes it requires someone literally going and digging stuff up. But we are now in the process of more digitizing our background data, also digitizing a lot of past speaker events. And we have a MUFON TV program out available as well. If you're a member of MUFON, you can watch a lot of past presenters where you find magnificent and very interesting information about past cases. So there's a vast archive. So yes.
Interesting. One of the cases that I personally haven't looked into, and I'm curious if you know much about it, is the Kingman UFO crash. Have you heard about this one?
Yes, I have.
What do
I
you
know
know
a
about
little bit
that?
about it. Well,
Okay.
I think it was 1964, but I could be wrong. And it has all the telltale case, significance that Roswell did.
1953. So that was around the
1953.
Eisenhower.
Yeah, right around that time. Right.
Yeah.
And I do know there was a great book out by Frank Frascino called Shoot Them Down. And that's about policies that we had within our military to literally attempt to shoot down UFOs. We no longer have that policy, but we did for a number of decades. People can look that up. I don't know a whole lot about the Kingman case, except that it likely happened there. And the reason we know that is because there's a big cover up. So whenever you have people trying to debunk or cover up a story, there's potentially maybe something more really going on to the story. I met a woman and her husband, who has now passed away, who did a little documentary about that. I don't remember the name of it, but I think it was a real case, and I think there were bodies involved. And many people who saw it, just sort of like, some of the other classic cases. So there's a famous one from New Mexico known as the Socorro case.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a video about the Socorro one as well. That one seemed very interesting to me. The reason I ask about the Kingman one, like I said, I haven't looked into it like let's say to the depth that I looked into the Phoenix Lights as an example. But what stood out to me about the Kingman one that I vaguely remember a detail being that the craft looked like it was just embedded into the ground, like, wasn't really damaged. It just went into it. And, I think I'm connecting a couple of dots, and I don't know if they may or may not be related, which is why I asked, because I read this book about Project Serpo, which is this very controversial book about this foreign exchange program between the U.S. military and apparently extraterrestrials. People debate the validity, and I think a lot of the debate comes around one of the people who was found to be leaking some of the memos that talked about Project Serpo was a known disinformation agent of what's his name? His name is right on the tip of my tongue. Do you remember this guy's name? Richard Doty.
Okay. Yes. Well,
yeah.
Wasn't Richard Doty a government agent too?
That's apparently the lore is that he is a known and admitted disinformation agent. Basically what I remember, the way Kingman relates to Project Serpo is they made it almost seem like the Serpo or the Kingman craft was a little bit of like a donation of some sort, like an exchange of technology. And that kind of stood out as distinctly a very different detail than maybe something like the Roswell. There was also another one. I don't know if you've heard about this, and I actually have a video coming out about this later on in my series as well, but it's kind of been hush hush. Do you know much about the Cave Creek UFO crash?
A little bit. It happened in Dreamy Draw, in the Dreamy Draw area. So Highway 51 goes right through there. And every time I drive through those mountains, I'm like, oh, this is where that happened. I don't know much of the details. Alejandro Rojas does. He has spoken for Phoenix MUFON about that, so I can put you in touch with him. And I don't remember the date on that, but it's also like 50s or 60s. That one I'm not quite sure about.
It was actually 1947. So like a couple months
it's way
after
back
Roswell.
there. 47 is close to Roswell. That's right.
Yep.
There are a number of Cave Creek reports where there are beings in people's houses, like grays that they see. And these were ranches at the time in the 50s and 60s, and with horses and, animal mutilation stories and stuff going on in Cave Creek all around the same time. So yeah, Arizona is rich with stories that, as you start to talk to people who have been here for decades, it kind of like the stories come out of the woodwork, like, oh yeah, well, when I was 10, this happened on my family farm. And we're like, oh, especially the Bradshaw Ranch, which we're going to be covering in this conference a little bit with Melinda.
Interesting.
And the Bradshaw Ranch is just outside of the Sedona area.
What is the Bradshaw Ranch known for?
Well, it's kind of like what we know of was going on in the Uinta Basin with
Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker. Thank you. I couldn't think of the name. Skinwalker. So similar stories to that. Portals, weird animals, weird events happening, time loss, it's just strange things. Animals that were, seemed very threatening and were shot at and were penetrated by the bullets and things like that. So weird stuff.
Yeah.
And there's more that Melinda Leslie will be revealing at this conference.
This question popped up just now. Once a MUFON case is closed and labeled unknown, what happens to that data? Is it shared with scientists or outside of the organization, archived, and does something?
It's archived within the organization in a number of ways, not only for its data, its details when it happened, but also its category as unknown. So someone doing research and wants to pull up all the unknowns right away, we can do that, and we can look at the similarities between the unknowns. We can also look at the similarities of the knowns. See, our job as field investigators is to do what's called IFO, or identify a flying object, right? IFO. And if we cannot identify it by satellite, or, there's all sorts of programs out there now that tell you what stuff is. You can hold up your phone at night and get the identity of, what's Starlink, what are different types of satellites with telecommunications companies, what are, comets and meteorites coming through, if there's a meteor shower going on. I mean, all this is accessible and almost required of a field investigator to check off the list. And once we absolutely cannot identify something, then we have to accept that it's an unknown. We don't attempt to prove it, but we try to prove everything else that it could be. And once we can't prove that it's something else, then we just label it as an unknown. It does go into a file, mostly only accessible to MUFON field investigators or sophisticated researchers that reach out to MUFON and want data. We may have sharing data policies. Like, I know we get information sometimes from Davenport, up in the Washington State area. He has the UFO Reporting Center, Peter Davenport. So we'll often find that what we have reports on, he also has reports on. So there's this double archive thing going on. And of course, the archives in Albuquerque. And there are also archives in other countries like Sweden and Holland and things like that people can go to.
Interesting. Peter Davenport, is he still running the UFO Reporting Center?
Yes, God bless him. And I think he's like 81 or 82. He's just amazing. It's his passion that keeps him going. I think he'd like to retire. I think he'd like to have someone take the helm. So anyone who lives in his neck of the woods, who's got the capabilities and the interest, it's time to step up, because it's a quite unique organization. And it's wonderful to have double record keeping, right? Double reporting systems. It never hurts. It kind of creates verifiability in our minds.
Speaking of Peter Davenport, he was the one person I wasn't able to get a hold of in time for my Phoenix Lights documentary, but luckily I was able to utilize some footage of a presentation he gave at a conference, which really added a lot of important context to that story. I'm curious, what is your take on the Phoenix Lights?
Wow. Well, I know Lynn Katai really well. I wasn't living in Phoenix at the time, but I can't tell you how many people I have run into since I've been here, just in almost 5 years, where they all saw it, and there's too many descriptions that are identically the same. right? This thing, if you took a newspaper and opened it up above your head, it would be bigger than that. So, as a field trained and investigator with MUFON, you are often given certain things to, use as shape and size estimates. So you learn how to hold your hand at arm's length and kind of do an inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, and you're told if it's 1,500 feet in the air, this is how big the craft has to be, right? So there are quick ways to do, assessments of size. So we're talking mile wide or more, huge and low, very low and slow. And this thing came down over Flagstaff, down 17, over Phoenix, then down over Casa Grande, towards Tucson, turned around and came back. It was huge. I mean, more than 10,000 people saw it. And all you have to do is, sometimes you're in line at Home Depot or something and somebody sees, oh, are you into UFOs? Because you got it on your keychain. And before you know it, you're in a half-hour discussion with them. At least I am. When they find out I'm a MUFON rep, they want to tell me their story. Right. And I'm like, okay, I really have to go, but they have to tell me. So, yeah, I think it was definitely real. And I think there were some other things that were set up deliberately. Once the people recognized what was going on, they were like, well, we got to debunk this. So let's throw some flares up. The military went out and put jet planes up to try to track this thing, see what it was. They threw up flares, which happened very differently the way flares fly in the ground. So there was a lot of, deliberate attempts to disqualify people's personal testimony and, intimidate them into secrecy. But even Fife Symington, who was the governor at the time, but then 15 years later, he comes out and says, oh yeah, well, I saw it myself. But, I was told to, lower the drama in the press. So he pulled that very famous, very disrespectful press conference where he brought out one of his aides dressed as an alien, saying we finally got to the bottom of the Phoenix Light. Forgive me, but that was below the belt and really unnecessary. And it ruined his reputation. And people didn't have any respect for him after that. So
I'm curious, is there some people are talking about some beeping in the background? Is that coming on my end? Do you know?
Yeah, it might be your fan. I think that was it.
All right. Is that better?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Okay. Was it that bad?
It just was you could hear a rotating, spinning sound.
Oh, okay.
It was like a wow.
So back.
Yeah.
Boom. Okay, perfect. So hopefully that'll help. One thing you were talking about there was like the size estimates and like the inching or whatever. One aspect from the film that I made and posted on my channel a few months back, it ended up getting cut from the final version of the video, just for pacing reasons. But there was a scene where I was talking to Sue Watson and I was cutting between Sue Watson, John Dover, and Peter Davenport, and them all talking about this these pilots, these F-15 pilots intercepting this craft over 7th Street or 7th Avenue and Indian School Road. Do you remember that scene from the doc?
I don't think I saw that one yet.
Okay. So there was
that was the Phoenix Lights doc you did. I did see it, but I don't remember this particular scene. Forgive me.
Okay, it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, it was a long video. So during that part, there was a part of Peter Davenport's presentation where him talking to Sue Watson, who was one of the first reports he got. She did an estimate, like she held her arms out like this, right? And so you were talking about like estimating size and distance and elevation to try to get a relative size of the craft. I was curious, how serious is that type of eyewitness testimony taken scientifically? Because from their estimates, they calculated from this angle she made with her arms like this. And then they used the second calculation, which was the F-15 whistleblowers said that they intercepted this thing at just above 10,000 feet. So for her, she's like, oh my God, it's so low to the ground. It's this big, but in reality, it's 10,000 feet in the air, which means it's much bigger than you can probably even comprehend. By their calculations, it was between 4 and 8 miles wide.
Wow. 4 and 8 miles. How does
Yeah.
something like that fly? Not with traditional standard methodologies. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I interrupted your question because it's so astonishing, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure I can answer it. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when people talk about, was the Phoenix Lights, was it like man-made, something man-made? There's a logical explanation, even if it's secret technology. My only retort to that, one of many, would be, okay, what human civilization is going to make an anti-gravitic craft that's 8 miles wide?
Right.
What's the
Right.
point?
Or is it something we built and the Navy has, and it's normally way up in the upper dimensions, right? And like, is it an outer space mothership that we interact with, or is it some sort of cooperative military industrial complex business deal with an extraterrestrial species? Who the heck knows? I certainly don't. Listen, I'm not tied in with intelligence, that's military based intelligence. The only intelligence I have is my intuition and my life experience.
Yeah.
But it does make you question. The thing that I will say about the importance of eyewitness testimony is, we in MUFON often have ex-military men who started MUFON. Some of them were really quite the original founders of MUFON. And they came to MUFON because the Blue Book project closed and there was no place for them to go to expand upon what they experienced as top-ranking pilots. So when you have a pilot explaining something to you about an aerial phenomenon, I think we should pay attention to it. Just like if you're getting a diagnosis and you have, a doctor who's a cardiologist or a oncologist giving you a report, you're going to pay more attention to his report than you will from, a guy in a health food store who's trying to sell you some vitamins. They both have probably some really good information for you, but which is, the most critical thing you need to pay attention to? So I wouldn't say the intelligence, but the experience and the knowledge base of the eyewitness is hugely important. And in a court of law, say with the Travis Walton case, when you have 7 people witness a murder and they all describe it the same way, bingo, that's a slam dunk. And that, person who's accused of the murder is going to jail or the electric chair. But if you have 7 people that see a UFO, oh, well, we have to debunk that. That can't possibly be real. They must have all been on drugs and had the same, delusion, right? That's the way it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even into the early 2000s. So your generation, Patrick, has to realize that there has been 80 years of secrecy and debunking that has been prevalent. And most of us in my generation never thought we would see serious congressional hearings on this topic. We actually produced serious congressional hearings as mock hearings. That was, the magnificent work of, I'm blanking on his name at the moment. It'll come to me in a moment. A wonderful advocate for the ending of UFO secrecy. It's not Stephen Greer. He did do one of the first ones, but Steve, I can't grab his last name at the moment. I apologize. It's been a hectic week.
Yeah. Okay. So
Steve Bassett. Thank you.
Steve
Bassett. So I have so much respect for Steve. He's amazing. So he did. And, where I could, I tried to help him with hearings and conferences in the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. before we had the real congressional hearings. We created the citizens hearings, or Steve created the citizens hearings, in order to bring public awareness to the point where we needed former members of Congress to sit and listen to this material so that we could get real hearings. That was the preliminary step. and it took years of planning and, over $1 million to produce that. So people need to have respect for these advocates who have been in the field for decades.
Yeah.
I certainly do. I certainly do.
One of the things that I've always noticed, and I only noticed this because I've never personally seen a UFO, even though I'm so interested and intrigued in the topic. I've have all these videos that I make on the topic, but I've never seen one. And it amazes me that whenever I find myself getting into a random conversation about UFOs with random people, I'll ask them, have you ever seen something? And I'm just shocked by the amount of people who actually say they have seen something. Like, I remember there was a stretch of a few months, like last year or something, where like 4 or 5 people in a row that I talked to about this topic, like 3 of them had seen something. So it really brought me to this point of like, okay, either they're all lying if I want to deny that this is true, or they all saw something, or what's the chances that at least just one of the people saw something, and it started to be like, okay, maybe there is something out there. And these weren't sightings like, oh, I saw a ball of light in the sky. Like, these people were saying, I saw a metallic craft hovering right above me. And I'm like, yo, this is crazy. And so that was what surprised me even talking to you, is the sighting. You told me privately your sighting where this big light of a rectangle like was in the distance, and then it blinked out and into reality as if skipping across the water closer to you. Like, that is something that will shift your paradigm. Like, if I saw something like that, what is life even like after you see something like that?
Yeah, that's the problem. That is the problem. You cannot, like, you have a balloon full of air, right? And once you poke a hole in that balloon and it like, your reality is never the same, right? So this is what people like Travis Walton and the logging crew have had to deal with. And they never chose to come forward. That's what people need to remember. Travis was famous because it was broken the news as a missing person story, right? A UFO story and a possible homicide. So this was big news in Arizona in 1975, like, oh my God. So yes, it changes your life forever. And you must begin then to re-examine everything you thought you knew was real, and it forces you to do a more deep dive into your own intellectual integrity. And then you also have to do a deep dive in, well, do I want to talk about this? Or especially in my generation when we grew up, because if you talked about a UFO encounter, they were like, oh, maybe she needs drugs, maybe it's time to, like, you want to see a psychiatrist, maybe you need that, like, people like looked at you like, oh, like you were a sad case, like, right?
Yeah.
Like you needed help. And it was dismissive and disrespectful, and really like a betrayal. Here you're offering something that's deeply profound that you're trying to make sense of, and your community around you is dismissing you or suggesting you need help. It's kind of like why UFO researchers kind of bonded together, just like many groups do. People who are gay, and they don't know how to deal with that, especially in my generation when it wasn't accepted so well. And when I was 20, it was a problem. So I think that's one of the aspects of this UFO phenomenon, is the camaraderie that those who have experienced something unusual have, and the fact that their life forever is changed, and then they need to figure out how to put it into perspective.
Yeah. What's interesting is, so as you know, because you and I filmed an episode for this series that I was working on, we filmed like 10 mini investigations. And honestly, the Phoenix Lights, it turned into a full-blown documentary, but I swear it was intended to be like a mini investigation that just turned into me talking to everybody. Yeah. But
look out, Patrick. It's yeah.
When I went on some of these investigations, I'll be honest, growing up, I'd had a couple of experiences that I would consider paranormal, but like not like Bigfoot encounters or UFO, but just like I saw an apparition once when I was 7, and I know exactly what it looked like. This person was wearing, they had like a raccoon cap, like from the 1800s, like they were hunting. So like that was a specific detail I remember. And there's like a handful of experiences like that. But when I started filming this series, one of the first things that really kind of forced me to question my own view of the reality was this last video that came out. Some people did make fun of it because the footage we got was like, I guess, a little shaky, but this was a real thing that really did change my paradigm. Because like when I would hear people talking about skinwalkers, Bigfoot, anything like that, I just immediately like wrote it off. Like Bigfoot was like something I didn't really care to know about, didn't really know much about. But when we went out to the superstitions, I didn't know much about what to expect other than I've heard that they're very haunted and cursed. And then all we heard about was these quote little people all day and how vicious they are and how they were brought here by the Anunnaki to protect the gold of the superstitions. And then within 20 minutes of getting out on the trails that night, literally before we even start our investigation, we have a rock this big smacks the ground right in front of me, and it clearly came from the direction of the darkness. And this is right after we see a strange light on the mountain, and we walk upon this unmarked grave on this trail that Steve happened to know the location of, right? So that's just like, we find a grave, we see this strange light, then this rock smacks the dirt out of nowhere. And I'm like, yo, I've heard legends about rocks at the superstitions, but this one, like, we were on the high ground and it came from the darkness and it just smacked the dirt so hard. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then that gets followed up with 3 instances of me not only hearing footsteps in the darkness, but distinctly tiny feet. And I'm still trying to process how feet that I can probably guess maybe 2 inches long are smacking the ground with such force that it's like, doo, 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 like, but very fast. Like, how are feet even hitting the ground that hard if they're that small? It doesn't make sense to me, but they were making beelines at us. And so me even telling people that when it happened 8-9 months ago or whatever, like, I've gotten those side-eyed looks, and now I'm like, okay, I understand that you might not believe this, but this objectively happened if you want to believe it or not, right?
And you weren't alone. Thank goodness you had someone else who experienced it with you. I remember you calling me up and telling me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get it. You know, some experiences we have are really hard to wrap our brain around, right? And before we start to talk about them, it's important to have digested them. And that's one of the things I really respect about Travis. All right. He didn't have a choice to come forward. He was under a huge amount of stress. He had to come forward because the police were looking for him. And, the first people that reach out and offer to help him are people really from, well, besides his family, are people from the National Enquirer. Right. So that's like, no, we now know historically that was a nationally intentional debunking magazine to kind of mix truth with fiction and mess it all up and confuse the public, right? Because that's what you do. You take some of the real truth and then you mix it in with a story that sounds maybe logical, and then you sell it like it's sensationalism, and people laugh at it, and then you have concealed it in plain sight, and you no longer need to deal with it because nobody's going to pay attention to it because they don't have enough of the facts, and they haven't met the people themselves and have done the research themselves to know what to think. So they walk away from it because they're confused and they don't want to be ridiculed themselves for even reading about it. Right. I remember if you picked up a National Enquirer and you had it in your car, people were like, oh, you're into that stuff now. Like, even having the paper was like, sometimes I would buy it to say, well, what are they saying about this? Right? Like, how far strange are they going to stretch the truth on this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's certainly interesting. The thing that's always stood out to me, just ever since even when I first met Travis, and I've only met him in person a couple of times at this point, but we hung out for a full weekend when we were filming that video. And even some of the interviews I'd seen from him before, my impression is that he doesn't necessarily even want to spend his time talking about this. Like,
You're
he
absolutely
does it because this is what happened and people are curious, but his story's never changed.
right.
And I just don't get the impression that he wants this to define him, you know?
Yeah, I think he'd really rather that this 50th anniversary not be acknowledged the way I'm promoting it to be acknowledged. And I hope he really doesn't feel exploited, because I'm not intending to do that at all. But he does need to be honored. He does need to be recognized. And younger generations like you need to kind of know his story for the future. And to the extent that I know it inside and outwards, having done the documentary and having done many podcasts with him now over the 10 years since the film's been out, I have such huge, incredible respect for Travis's integrity. And it's really my goal to communicate that about him when we have this anniversary up in Sedona.
Yeah. So Travis is going to be there. So I guess if people wanted to even ask questions to Travis himself, you know, make sure you get tickets to the event before it sells out. I'm assuming there's still tickets.
Well, there
right?
are. We'll do some walk-ins at the door as well on Saturday and on Sunday. But today, actually, the online tickets sort of close, just so we have time to make up nice name badges for people, and we have a really good idea of who's actually coming. But we are going to have some vendor tables outside. So if even people want to just show up and talk to David Hatcher Childress, who will be there, Childress, I should say. Also, we have Don Schmidt coming in, and Travis will be there. So they'll probably be outside with some vending tables coming and going from our venue, which is the Global Center for Christ Consciousness on Northview Road in Sedona. It should be really, worthwhile. And, like I said, we have a one-day pass and for both Saturday, and you can buy a one-day pass for Sunday, which will include Monday morning, because we only start at noon. So it's half a day Sunday afternoon, and then it's half a day Monday. So that makes up a full day. So we are doing those two things kind of on a special for $120 as a walk-in price for people.
Cool. Yeah, and if you guys want any more information, I have the link in the description below. So it should be pretty simple on you guys if you wanted to check it out. So real quick, if you're in the chat, if you're watching this live, like, this is an opportunity to ask us anything, specifically Jen, while we're here. And so go ahead and type questions in the chat and I'll start asking them to her. But I guess one question I have that I saw in the chat, ask Jen, what's up with the underground base in Clarksdale? Do you know about this?
Yes, this is what Melinda Leslie is going to be talking about.
Okay.
So I'm not the expert on it, but she's just done a great program with Ross Coulthart from Australia with Newsmax. And I think you're going to be very interested in hearing her presentation. I believe that, the Clarksdale area and the Bradshaw Ranch are kind of like neck and neck. So, but I think there's been, without revealing too much, I think there's been special equipment used that can detect underground tunneling systems, and some of them go into the Clarksdale area. So, tune in for Linda's presentation to know more about that.
Okay, so let's assume I don't know anything about Linda. I've just heard about Clarksdale for the first time just now. Give me like at least something. Like, what do you mean? All right, so what does that imply? If there's underground tunnels under there, is that the little people just like they're having a little village, or is there an alien base under there? Is it a military base? Like, what is some of the speculation? Like, why is this important for the average casual viewer?
Well, the speculation is that, yes, there's an underground military base that connects in near and through the Bradshaw Ranch. And there's eyewitness accounts of very unusual light activity going in and out of the mountains at night. Melinda has seen it herself, as well as many of the people on her tours with night vision goggles. There's military helicopters surveilling the area continuously, interacting with other unknown lights that come in from the upper atmosphere and then descend underground. What's that? We don't know. And the special camera equipment that was used to detect underground caverns has detected large tunnels that are square, rectangular, large enough to drive a semi through. So that's about the most that I know. I'm not really trying to be secretive. I just have to say I don't want to give false information, but that's the most I can remember from what I've heard in some of the descriptions from the people who have been doing the research on it.
Okay. So as someone who's in MUFON, I guess this is my own personal question. How often do the reports that you guys get not involve UFOs, but involve like physical, like encountering beings that are non-human?
There are some accounts. In fact, there's a whole category system within MUFON that is like, is it a light in the sky kind of encounter, or does it land? Is there, physical trace evidence, and is there actually contact with and communication with and a memory of telepathic communication or some sort like that, or is it an abduction? So that, it goes different levels, from level 1 up to level 5 or 6 of the type of encounter that it is. And although, as I said, I don't do that particular type of field investigation research, there are a number, not a lot, but there are a number of them. Say on average sightings in Arizona, some months we can have upwards of 50 sightings, and other months there can be just 10 or so going on that are investigated. So when you compare all the states in the United States and include Canada, there are roughly around 10,000 sightings a year, just roughly speaking, right? Give or take every year. And we now know statistically that less than 1 in 10 people have the courage to actually go online, go to MUFON.com, fill out, report a UFO sighting form, which takes some time and some effort to do. Less than 10% of the people who have an encounter bother to call the UFO reporting center or fill out a form at MUFON. I think it's partially because they've been ridiculed for so long not to do it, especially older people like me. They don't want to be bothered with it. They don't, they can't do anything about it. They saw something. Yeah. What does it mean? Does it affect their life on a day-to-day basis? Maybe not. Can they forget about it? Probably not. But are they going to bother to report it? No. So if 1 in 10 reports is getting reported, and we have about 10,000 a year reported, that means roughly there's 100,000 sightings a year between United States and Canada. And so that's just this part of the globe. Multiply that times 4, at least 4 other parts of the globe, major continents, right? And, you can do the math. Sightings are tremendous, and they're all over the world. And this past 2 years, 2024, we saw the drone invasion, right? So were they drones or were they not drones? Well, there's a lot of evidence that they were not typical drones. If you look at the news reports, you look at the people reporting them, it was huge. So you could have literally said that 2004 was the beginning of an invasion of some sort going on. And it was happening all over the world. It wasn't just New Jersey. It was all over the world and all over the United States and Canada as well. So the reports are huge. The numbers of actual personal contacts versus, less, it's far less those that say, well, I encountered a being, or, a craft landed and a being came out and talked to me. It does happen, but it's far less than actual lights in the sky.
Does every report get investigated, or do you guys have to pick and choose which ones to actually look into?
We do our darndest to actually investigate every report, but in some states, we don't even have a state director. Most states we do, but in some states, it's the adjoining state director who's taken on the job because the other state director became ill or passed away, or, no one, they didn't cultivate someone to take their job over, and they had to retire and they couldn't handle it anymore because it can be involved. especially when there's a wave coming through your neck of the woods, which happens periodically, like the San Luis Valley in Colorado, there's these waves, right? And New
Yeah.
Mexico, there's these waves. In Arizona, we get these waves. So the Hudson Valley, there's still waves up in New York. So, it's a lot of work, but yes, yeah, the reports keep coming. It's like somehow they didn't get the message, they weren't real or whatever, right?
Yeah. The what surprises me is and I've noticed this on pretty much any Phoenix Lights video I've ever seen, including the one that I posted, is the amount of comments of people reporting that they saw either the exact sighting, especially with the Phoenix Lights. Like, so many people in the comments witnessed it and are giving their account in the comments. But then what also surprises me is the sheer amount of people who have seen what they say is the same thing, but 3 years ago, 5 years ago, in this part of Phoenix, in that part of Arizona. So are
Yeah.
you guys, like, do you know if there's been any recent waves of sightings of craft similar to the Phoenix Lights?
No, I do not, and I would have to defer to Stacy Wright on that one. She very well might know, or say our assistant state director Shane Hurd, or one of those people. I have to say I haven't kept up with what's being reported, and I myself have a lovely little patio in my backyard, and I have witnessed some unusual lights, but I think it was a drone. But I saw something flying like in a direction, like, and it wasn't a blinking light, which usually the airplanes are. I live kind of north side of Phoenix, and 17 isn't far from me. So a lot of the planes, like say coming in from the northwest, come right down along 17. I recognize their patterns. They come from one end to the other, follow 17, and then they turn, and then they head in towards the airport and make a big loop around and land. I can't see them land, but I can see them go by. Well, this thing came up, and then it stopped, and then it did this, 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 and then it came kind of right towards me, and then it kind of went this and this and this and went back, and then finally it flew off at the same speed. So I think it was a police helicopter of some sort, not a helicopter, but a police drone that maybe it was a remotely operated drone. I couldn't hear the drone. It wasn't close enough for me to hear the whoop, 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 that we
Yeah.
can hear from drones. But it was a very unusual light. But it didn't like take off. It didn't like shoot off. So when you see something like that happen, you're like, okay, that's pretty unusual. So there are
Yeah.
ways to assess what you're looking at and seeing. But for sure, we've got stuff happening. And Lynn Katai will tell you many people have reported things similar to the Phoenix Lights before and after the actual March 13th, 1997 event. I think that's
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah. One thing that I've always noticed, and this is what I started noticing this around the time where I was like, a lot of people that I talk to claim they've seen something. The people who say they've seen something, typically it seems to me that they've seen something multiple times. It's rarely just like, oh, this one time a long time ago. And then me, myself, I'm like waiting. I'm always looking at the sky. I've never seen anything. Um, have you noticed that too? Do you think there's something to the aspect that people who see it tend to see it often?
Well, no, I think what happens is once somebody sees something, they know the potential is real, and they tend to have more keen observation skills after that because they are reevaluating their own psychological well-being, right? And they're paying attention to what looks normal, what doesn't look normal, and they remember things that look really weird. So, I mean, I don't know if we have time, but I can tell you an incident that happened to me when I was in college, which is still kind of in my gray box, but
Okay.
you never forget it, right? So, do we have time for that?
Yes,
Not in the
absolutely. The
timer?
floor is yours.
Okay, so in 1977, I went back to the University of Arizona to finish my undergraduate degree in the science of textiles. And from 77 to 1980, I was there working on a Bachelor of Science degree. So one day on the green lawn at the University of Arizona in Tucson, we're all spread out, kind of sunbathing or doing homework in the middle of this big green lawn. If anybody's ever been to campus, they know it well. It's the main entrance to the college. All of a sudden we hear this sputtering, this puts, and people are looking up and they're gasping like, oh, and there is a Maelstrom Air Force Base jet, right, which is crashing. And it comes in really low right over the green lawn, just misses campus. And the guy who's the pilot ejects right while he's over the lawn. So he ejects out. Everybody sees it. We're covered with the dust from this ejection process. And we hear the crash and we see the flames, right? So we're like, oh my gosh. So that teaches us, oh my God, we got to keep looking up, right? So I lived with a roommate from South Africa who was a runner. She taught me how to be more of a professional track runner, although I never joined the track team, but she really taught me how to run. And we used to run a local college, a local high school where we lived, just a few miles from campus. So we're out there one day running the track about a month, 2 months later, right? And we're running the track and we see these two lights really, really high up in the sky. I would say they're what looks like a jet flying at least 10,000 feet, maybe 20,000 feet. You can see a light. You can usually see a dust, trail coming from them, like a condensation trail. We didn't see that, but we saw these two lights and they were coming right for each other, and we're like, we're running the track and we're looking and suddenly we stop and we're like, oh, is there going to be another crash? Like, oh, what's going on? Because there's a military base close to where we were to school. And we thought, oh my gosh. So we stop and other people on the track stop and we watch and this thing comes together and all of a sudden, boom, there's like this big, like white ball that shows up, like big. And then it collapses back down small. Then it breaks apart into like all these little pieces, but they don't fall to the ground. They all separate into little white lights in the sky. And then they all start to dance around like a flock of birds. And we're standing there going, what the heck is that? And then all of a sudden, and we're like, there's eight or nine of us out there on the track field, right? Then we watch them take off. Choom, 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 like, it's like they wait, like you're first, I'll go second, you go next, you go third, you're fourth, you're fifth, you're sixth. And then suddenly like 12 of them just like choop, 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 choop. And they're all gone. And we're like, oh my gosh. So like, okay, well, that was weird. We just go back to running because there's no way to understand what that just was, right? We just have to kind of like, all right. So that was strange. And I've had other sightings too, but they're different. I mean, it's not the same as this big rectangle that came in, so.
Yeah. That's wild. Yeah. So like what, so you think it's purely just being more observative thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think once somebody has a sighting that they're trying to make sense of, they're more attuned. It's just like once you've been in a car accident, you're a better driver. You're like, oh my God, I got to watch out. Like this could happen, like if I'm not paying attention, and it's usually an accident because it's an accident, you're not paying attention and it's pretty traumatic. Or, just like anything, once you cut yourself with a sharp knife, you learn to be more respectful of sharp knives. I think the same thing is true of the UFO phenomenon. Yeah. You learn to just be more observant and to mark when you're looking at something that can't, you start to try to identify it in your mind, right? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it a drone? Right? Is it, a helicopter? What am I seeing? How is it operating? Do I hear anything? And then you start positioning yourself like, okay, like it was here and it's tracking and it's moving, but it moved way too fast from here to here. Like then what it was doing from here to here. So like something's going on. So yes, once you have had a sighting, it makes you a better observer and you're more attuned to what you're looking at.
That's funny because so that makes sense. Absolutely. I feel like I definitely look at the sky a lot. And it's funny to me because Tom King, who I interviewed for the Phoenix Lights documentary, he was one of the people who got one of the infamous videos from that night. He says the same thing. how is it that, and here's what stood out to me about Tom King. His life currently is dedicated, and it seems like it always has been dedicated to rigging up his house with cameras looking at every inch of the Phoenix sky that he possibly can from his house. And he has all this fancy equipment. Have you heard of this guy?
No, but I'd like to interview him myself and have him speak for Sedona MUFON. So please connect us.
He would probably love that. But yeah, he's kind of particular in what he likes to do sometimes. So I'll do my best to connect you guys. I actually have a video about the Dreamy Draw, the Cave Creek UFO crash, coming out later on in the second half of my series, and I've been very hush hush about it because a really infamous person from the Phoenix Lights documentary does come back up as a key character in that case. Actually, you know what? I'll give you a little hint. It's Jim Delatoso. So I brought up the Cave Creek UFO crash earlier in this live stream to you just because it's interesting in me for a number of reasons. But a huge synchronicity, when I was filming the Phoenix Lights documentary, I needed to buy a VCR for like the set, like, you know, for the introduction of my video, right? So I can get the shot of me pushing a videotape into the VCR. So I had to buy a VHS tape from this guy off Facebook Marketplace who was selling VHS tapes for $2 a pop. And so I end up messaging this guy. I was like, hey, can I get 5 blank VHS tapes for $10? He says, yes. I go over to his house. This guy's got to be like 90 years old. He comes out of his house and he basically, he goes, what do you guys need these tapes for? Because it's me and my videographer, and we had a video camera. And I was like, oh, we're filming this documentary about the Phoenix Lights. And he goes, oh, you know, I think I have a VHS about a UFO somewhere laying around. I was like, could I buy it off of you? And he was like, well, I can't sell it to you. It belongs to my brother, but I could let you borrow it. And I was like, okay. And I had no idea what that meant. Like, oh, I have a VHS of a UFO. I thought it was going to be like UFO video. It was actually a news report that they did about the Cave Creek UFO crash. Apparently the ranch where this UFO crashed on, this old man used to own that property. And so he was like, yeah, they filmed the news report on my driveway or whatever. So I made copies of this VHS tape. And obviously that story, it's such a huge synchronicity that, I mean, there's no place that it would have belonged in the documentary. So I'm happy I can tell it now. But when I looked into the Cave Creek UFO crash, what stood out to me was a couple of things. One, it happened only a couple of months after Roswell, same year, 1947. But few people talked about it because it kind of got overshadowed by the story of Roswell, which happened that summer before. Secondly, did you know that in the area basically of Phoenix, right? Just south of Cave Creek, the first ever picture of a flying saucer was published. And it was published the day before the Roswell UFO crash news article. It was a picture of this flying object that this amateur photographer and the news article basically goes, I heard this thing going whoosh and then making a circle, huge circle, and come back whoosh. It's going super fast. And he just snapped a photo of it. And it was published in Phoenix the day before the Roswell newspaper article. All right. So
amazing. I didn't know that. We have Don Schmidt speaking at our conference. He's going to want to know this. He's one of the experts on Roswell.
So I did a lot of digging into this Cave Creek UFO crash, and obviously I have a whole video coming out about this later, like an actual documentary piece. But what stood out to me about it was one of the men, the guy who was interviewed on this old man's driveway, he didn't live at the property, but he was there. He witnessed the crash happen. He witnessed the beings. He witnessed the government come in with the trucks and like cover it all up. He even witnessed them change the topography of the land, of the geography of the area All right. And so, and they did this at multiple places. One specifically you brought up was Dreamy Draw. Why is there this dam in the middle of the desert where there's no water? That's potentially one of the places where this craft skipped on the ground, among a couple of other places where it eventually settled onto this property. And I happened to run into this guy when I bought a tape off of him on Facebook Marketplace. Okay. And so what's crazy is one of the only physical pieces of evidence other than this guy's testimony is a wall-sized art piece, the size of a wall, okay? That's like 9 feet by 12 feet or something. And it's a hand-drawn mural drawn by a surgeon, I guess the first surgeon in the city of Phoenix. He drew it. It was in his attic, stowed away. And it's basically a mural of the city of Phoenix and him in the middle performing an autopsy on an alien, presumably in 1947, on this ranch in Cave Creek. Guess who discovered the drawing?
Jim Delatoso?
It was in Jim Delatoso's attic when Jim Delatoso bought the house of said surgeon.
Oh, I know the ranch. Oh my goodness. Wow. What a story. So have you talked to Jim yet? You got to have him on your show.
Oh yeah. So that interview that we did for the Phoenix Lights video, I haven't even posted the full version of that. I posted the Phoenix Lights, which was the first half of the interview, on Patreon, but I didn't post the second half because the second half is me questioning him about the Dreamy Draw, this mural. And honestly, this was before everything ended up going down with me and Jim kind of having a little bit of tension there. But at the time, he promised to be able to show me a couple of things. One, he promised that he would show me this mural, which he still has stowed away somewhere. And two, he promised that he would show me the Roy Haddock's tape that he has stowed away in a box somewhere. But you know, after all of those conversations, you know, the phone calls around the Men in Black kind of happened. And so I don't know that I'll ever get to see those. But, you know, funny, he actually texted me last night, believe it or not. I haven't talked to Jim for
was it something on baking?
Yes. Did you get the same text?
I got the same text. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the way he'll reach out, just, you know, kind of say hi. Not UFO related, but health and wellness for sure.
Yeah.
So I have a huge amount of respect for Jim, and I imagine there's a deeper story there that may come out. Jim is an amazing guy with an incredible life history as a film producer and also head of Village Labs. He also used to be audio video tech for major bands, right? He put Moody Blues and many of them on the road for decades. And then film crews would come to him and he'd put them on the road. So he's just an amazing person with many talents. And yeah, there could be a whole documentary done about him for sure, I bet. And I love the synchronicity of your stories, because it's like, that is just how the universe works, right? You're digging. And then it's like something pops up you don't even expect. And you're like, oh my gosh, how the heck was I lucky enough to be the right person that called the right phone number, that got the right tape, that connected to the, I mean, wow. Yeah. That's like crazy. That's unbelievable.
And I actually did it. I was able to utilize some of the tape that he did let me borrow. I copied it with the VCR I bought. And it was basically, I guess his brother or something used to just have a hobby. I think this is what a lot of your generation loved to do in the 90s. It's just like, let me record the entire day's worth of TV and just stow it on a VHS somewhere.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
So he had 8 hours of just whatever was on TV, and it happened to include this news report that they did on their ranch. But part of that news report, they also talked about like Fife Simonton's legal troubles. And they actually did this news report like in June of 1997. So the news was around the same time of the Phoenix Lights. So I was able to utilize some of the footage from that for when I was kind of explaining the legal trouble he was in. But what's crazy.
That's important you mentioned that, if you don't mind me interrupting you for a minute, because that may explain why he debunked what was going on. There might have been some, I'm not accusing him of taking a payoff, but there might have been some kind of payoff if he was in legal trouble. There might have been a quid quo pro deal of some sort to debunk this, and then his legal issues may go away. And in fact, I think with, if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of what happened, but I don't really know the details.
Yeah. Before we get too far off the Jim Delatoso thing, I want to say this because I want people to understand. When I met Jim for that interview, that was the first time we met in person. And then I obviously talked to him on the phone before that. That was kind of told in the documentary as well. And then all the conversations that we had afterwards, we had talked for many hours on the phone. Like, what you guys saw was the tip of the iceberg as far as the conversations, keeping it relevant to the story of the Phoenix Lights. But I genuinely feel like, even now, I feel a camaraderie with Jim. I feel like we're friends, which makes, like I was trying to say, is like, it's a little bit bittersweet in the sense of, clearly there was a conflict of a difference of accounts of stories going on here of what happened with the Phoenix Lights. Was Richard Curtis real? And what happened to the tape? What was the Men in Black? And even that story goes deeper to where there were parts of the conversation I wouldn't even want to put in there for legal reasons, because then we get into hearsay about people's deaths, which is not conducive to the families of those people, right?
No,
so
absolutely.
I don't know what Jim got involved in. All I got to say is it seems like this is much bigger than him, and if he is involved with trying to control the narrative in some way, I'm sure he did what felt right for him. But that said, I wish the guy nothing but the best. And there's no weird feelings from my end, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I don't know all the specific details that you speak of, but when life happens, you have 5 different people witnessing an accident of some sort, and they'll all have it from a slightly different perspective. So I can't, I can't speak to personal witness testimony beyond the fact that I have huge respect for Jim's integrity. So,
yeah.
So good luck with it. You got to keep digging. You're a good researcher, and you're not afraid to tackle the discrepancies. And I think we have to take, in any situation, we have to take in all of the evidence, not cherry pick the evidence that fits our perspective, but we have to look at all of the evidence before and then lay it out, even the pieces that don't quite fit, because there might be information that surfaces 20 years from now that fits that gap. And then suddenly we understand, oh, okay, that was going on behind the scenes, but these people had no idea what was happening, but there was somebody else involved that has a piece of that puzzle. So it's important to take in all the facts before you make an assessment. And all we can ever do is make an assessment with all the information we have. But if we cherry pick the information, we're leading ourselves astray.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, do you have a relationship, or do you know Frances Barwood at all?
I have never met Frances, no, and I've never spoken with her on the phone, but I admire that lady to the nth degree, and I can imagine what it was like to be her. I have maybe some of the similar personality traits where I would be the likely one, if I was on a city council board, to bring the subject up and experience the type of dismissal and ridicule that she did, right? Yes. Yeah. I remember once approaching my police department back in Philadelphia, and I handed her my business card and said, I'm a volunteer with MUFON, and I do, I work with people who do UFO reports and investigations, and I know you're the police and you may get reports, and so if you want to call me, I can put you in touch with people. And while they paid attention to me when I was there doing community active work around domestic violence, which I also did, I was part of a women's group of organizations that was a coalition that worked with police departments and educated them on domestic violence. For that, they would talk to me. But when I handed them my business card on UFOs, they laughed and said, no, thank you. So,
Yeah.
we have to, we have to live in the times we live.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I could talk about UFOs for hours. Do you want to keep talking, or do you have anything to get to?
Well, I'm good. What I would like to say is that people who are considering coming up to the Skyfire conference, this is only going to be once. There's only one 50th anniversary celebration honoring Travis Walton. And if people know the story or don't know the story, I mean, they can watch my film between now and the conference. It's available on YouTube and Amazon Prime and Tubi and multiple streaming channels in multiple languages, so they could watch it. Not that I'm pitching my own film, but if they want to know that background, they can easily access that film right now, free of charge in some cases to them. And that will give them a sense of why we're gathering for the 50th anniversary. And there's top-notch people. I have to say the speakers that are coming in are totally top-notch. And they're coming in not necessarily because I asked them, but because they have so much respect for Travis, right? And so to the extent that I could honor Travis and leverage his notoriety and his fame with these other speakers, it's going to be a monumental once off experience. And it's also not a huge conference. There's not 1,000 people that are going to be there. We're going to be like 130, maybe 140, and that's it. So it's an interesting environment, close-knit group of people, like-minded, and it has a bell curve in terms of learning. So if your audience is like, I know something about the UFOs perspective, but not a whole lot, we're doing like secrecy to transparency. We're doing like 1940 Roswell, then into the 70s with the Travis Walton story. We're also doing like what happened after the Second World War. What's all these stories of the Nazis with UFO technology that went to Antarctica. David Childress is going to be speaking on that, so that's going to be fantastic. And then we also have Stacy Wright, who's our MUFON state director. She's going to talk about MUFON and a little bit about, well, what did the ancient Sumerians say about this? How far back in history does it go, right? What are our biblical stories? Why do we need to pay attention to ancient history as well as, what we might consider to be older history in the United States from the 40s and 50s? What was going on in 1947, right? So it's like, there's really like an education. And by the end of the conference, we're going to be closing with wonderful people who are a brand new surprise to our speaker docket. Desiree and JJ Hertek, who I admire and have great respect for, have decided to come forward because they'll be in Sedona, and they're going to offer the closing perspective. How do we deal with 80 years of secrecy? And then suddenly roll over and say, okay, yes, it's real, and we're having congressional hearings on it now, and we'll get to the bottom of it. And by Friday, we'll tell you in the evening news what's going on. Like, no. If you have 80 years of secrecy, you got to have 80 years of education, right? There's got to be a quid pro quo, a balance somewhere here, right? And that balance starts with us. So what do we do as citizens to bring ourselves up? Remember what John F. Kennedy used to say, ask not what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country, right? So your listening audience can do something for the UFO community by educating themselves, right? And then by not being afraid to talk about their own experiences. And so that's what we're empowering people to do. And then we're closing with the New Paradigm Institute's Global World Disclosure Day. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, and they can't come to the conference, they should at least tune into that. That's going to be happening actually on Sunday. It's live, and anyone can go to the New Paradigm Institute website or just Google the Global World Disclosure Day 2025, and they'll get it. Or they could watch the replay from last year as well. It's a very powerful international community of experts that make 5-minute statements or less about the profundity of the UFO phenomenon and why it's important, why it's related to, human health and wellness, psychological, environmental wellness, technology, clean air, clean water, manipulations from the military industrial complex, what we need to be aware of, what's happening in different countries all around the world right now, and the fear of, well, I wouldn't say the fear, but the potential of, digital identity connected to your money and things like that. People need to start to wake up and realize there are many things all happening at once, and it can be quite confusing. But as citizens, we can take citizen action as much as we can to tell our elected officials what we want. How do we want to set policy going forward? And that's exactly what the New Paradigm Institute is doing. And they're looking for people to be involved with them. So there's many like-minded groups out there, right? And the more we can find our commonality to educate ourselves and address this issue, the greater potential we have of really building a nice future for ourselves, right? And a peaceful future for ourselves, rather than one based in fear and intimidation and control. Yeah. So, many things are all tied together, and it seems like they're all happening at once. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed. But you need to kind of take a step back, say, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to take a deep breath on this and try to integrate and digest what's really happening and how these pieces are all interrelated, because they are, right? Medicine, health and wellness, and the environment, the UFO subject, it's all one big piece. It's not completely separate, just like our bodies, right? Everything is connected to everything else. If your eyesight goes, it's going to affect your health and wellness. If you break a bone, you can't walk. It's the same sort of thing. It's a whole body system. And we need to start thinking about our history and the health of the earth and our place in the universe as a whole body system. And we need to start thinking about it more unified than separated and divided. I'll put it that way. All right. So that's what we're going to be doing at the Skyfire Summit, on top of honoring Travis, because Travis has been doing that himself for 50 years. And it's time we step back and respect him for the ridicule he withstood and the debunking that he's withstood. I know you're probably going to be addressing that in your project. So I think it's
real quick. I wanted to point out something that I noticed. So the film that you did with Travis, was that on the 40th anniversary?
Yes, 10 years ago. Yes. Okay.
So literally,
and then I had to remake it. As you may find out as a filmmaker, sometimes you get into rights issues, and I had a rights issue with some archive footage. So rather than considering a lawsuit with someone who didn't want me to have his film footage in my film, even though we had some email and phone agreements about it, I just said, it's fine. You're going to send me a cease and desist letter. I'll go look for other footage. I can do without your footage, but it's already up and on YouTube out there. So I don't know what you're so upset about me including it, even though I'm willing to pay you for it. But if you're not willing to sign my contract, I'll go find other footage. So that's what I did. So I had to remake the film in 2015 or 17 and 18, which I did. So there's a new version out there, but it's still the same title of the same film. It's just a remake of it.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say with your film, the thing that I liked about it specifically, and why I definitely am openly calling it's definitely at least in my top 5 favorite UFO documentaries, right? So it's maybe top 3. All right. The reason why I like it so much, and I was saying this to people even before I even ran into you and met you last year, and then we ended up filming the video that we filmed, which will be my episode 5 in my series. I liked it because you kind of caught it at a unique time where you were able to still interview everyone involved, kind of like with the Phoenix Lights. The video that I did, it'd be very hard to have that moment again for anybody, just because the amount of people I was able to talk to all at once, right? So like you got everybody involved with the story at a perfect time, but also, you know, watching it, I felt like you did a good job of bringing the viewer into the emotional experience of it. It kind of plays out like a true crime with a paranormal twist, almost like in a way that the Phoenix Lights video did, right? And the thing that stood out to me is as I was watching it, I genuinely felt fear in the part where Travis was getting abducted. And I was just like, this has to be very like reflective of the fear of the moment. And so like as someone who's recently got into filmmaking myself, it's one of my favorites. So I highly recommend people go check it out. And you know, it definitely set the high bar for the video that we have coming out here soon that we did together, because I would like to create something that is also timeless in a sense. I don't want it to be just another YouTube video, as with any of the videos I've been posting lately. And so I know we did get a couple of what I would consider recent updates to even some of the stuff that you developed in your doc. And so I can't wait to release all of that as well.
Well, if I may, thank you for the compliment, but I always like to give kudos where it's deserved. And I really have to honor and acknowledge my nephew, Adam Stein, who went to UCLA Film School. I did not. And he helped me quite a bit. In 2014, and by October of 2014, I had a 4-hour film, and I was scratching my head going, well, how am I going to get this down to, you know, an hour and a half for a film festival deadline that was like December 29th or something? You know, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And I relied on him. He helped me tremendously. So Adam Stein and a cohort who worked with him named Zach Weil did an incredible job in a very short amount of time, really honing that film into something that was better than I could have done on my own. And I'm forever in debt and very grateful to Adam. He really demonstrated his skill and ability, and he's gone on to many bigger and better things, which is great. So thank you, though. It was a great story, and he took on the challenge and did an incredible job with it.
Yeah. Well, they say the film gets written 3 times. It's when you write the script, when you film it, and when you edit it. So you gave credit to the editors, but you got to give credit to yourself for the first 2 aspects too.
Yeah. If the film never would have happened if it wasn't for me. You're right.
Yeah.
You know? And there are, if anyone who picks it up or picks up the DVD and goes online, you can see I have credit to many associate producers. Stanton Friedman was a great mentor to me in that, and so was Kathleen Marden and Ben Hansen and Lee Spiegel, and you know, many people helped me, including Peter Robbins and Bob Terrio in Philadelphia. So, and Bob
Richard Dolan was in there too.
Richard Dolan was in it. That's right. But some people really like helped me like hone the storyline and told me, don't pay attention to that, pay attention to this, or this is what was really going on, and this is what they were saying about it, but that wasn't true. And you know, when you go to dig, you dig up everything, and then you're like, you have to sort through it, and I had to do it very quickly. So I really relied on people like Stanton and of course Travis and all the logging crew members that I interviewed for their testimony, and Peter Robbins, and you know, there were many people I'm very grateful to for help in that project.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on my channel, and I hope that people go check out your Skyfire Summit. And I definitely hope to be making an appearance at some point in the weekend too, so maybe you'll see me there.
I would really like it. I'll try to arrange a press pass for you. I made a little note for myself, and it's sedonamufon.org for people who want to find out about the normal programs I do up there in Sedona, which are once a month usually on the second or third Sunday of the month. But then this conference is something very special. It's the first conference I've ever done, and maybe the last I'll do up there. I don't know, but it should be really good. And if people have the chance to come, even if they want to do a walk-in at the door, we're prepared to work with them. So thank you, Patrick. This has been wonderful.
Absolutely. All righty. Bye, guys. All right.